Well, I thought the two speakers highlighted the problem with the Congo and the unethical and tragic problem of natural resource development and exploitation there. Meanwhile, the biggest producer in Western Australia, Talison, shut down their tantalum operations in later 2008, preserving their resources, their reserves, because they are all reserves there, well known, well identified, for the future. Meanwhile, they're concentrating on their spodumene, produce spodumene concentrates primarily for export to China. Now, the tantalum story, there isn't any real shortage of tantalum, it's just a question of demand.
Well, a highlight so far has been Mike Davies of Global Witness. We know Mike, we've worked with him on some other forums, and they represent, I guess, the next generation of NGO, the non-governmental organizations. I think a lot of times people from industry, when they hear environmental groups or NGOs, they sort of run for cover because they think, obviously, they're not going to tell us anything that we want to hear. And even further than that, they may say something that's not going to help my company. But Global Witness, who Mike works with, has become the preeminent NGO in Europe, and they have focused exclusively on natural resource issues. They've done a lot of really good work. A few years ago, they were involved in establishing the Kimberley process, which certifies diamonds, and was mostly the single thing that was most responsible for the stopping the war in Africa over diamonds. Saved a lot of lives. They were key in that Kimberley process. So now what they've been doing is getting involved with conflict or blood minerals, and that would be tin, tantalum, and tungsten. These are minerals that have been mined by warring parties illegally in Central Africa, mostly in the DRC, that has financed those wars and caused the death of over 5 million people alone in the Congo. You know, it's the unspoken genocide of our times. And but rather than just as I say, bitch from the bushes, these guys actually are trying to find doable, enforceable solutions. That's what they're trying to do. So we've engaged with them. We found them to be just a wealth of knowledge about where the community is, what is really happening. And so today, he brought the message to the Lion's Den. And he told the investors, you now know what's going on. You need to do something about it. And what you need to do is to weigh the ethical risks of your investment, not just the economic risk. So I think it was a pretty positive presentation.
I'd like to begin by saying I wasn't aware there was interest in Sudan and natural resources here, but if anyone wants to pick that up with me afterwards, please let me know. We actually had one of my team at Global Witness involved in a live debate last night on the BBC Arabic TV service with the Sudanese Minister for Energy in Khartoum about discrepancies in oil production figures, which suggests that the south of Sudan is not getting a very fair deal. Anyway, that's not what I've come to talk about. Ron has been kind enough to give me a very fulsome introduction, so I can spare you more about our background as an organisation. I just mentioned one more thing in terms of our work with industries to resolve problems concerning natural resources. Ron mentioned the Kimberley process to do with conflict diamonds, which we were involved in setting up and which we still participate in very vigorously. We've also played a role in recent years in helping to establish something called the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which is about combating corruption in the oil sector worldwide. Anyway, the issue I wanted to talk to you about today concerns tantalum and the conflict in the eastern part of Congo in Central Africa. We've been investigating the economic dimensions of this conflict for several years now, and in fact a couple of my colleagues have just got back from a month in eastern Congo and neighbouring Rwanda doing some investigations in mining areas, including activities which I suspect breach our own health and safety guidelines, such as going quite a long way down man-made mine shafts which are not particularly safe. But the point being, we've been getting out there and really getting to grips with what's going on the ground. So what we found over the past couple of years is that in this conflict in the east of Congo, which has many causes, which I won't go into now, the main warring parties, the government army, and non-state armed groups, such as the FDLR, have been competing increasingly less for strategic gains and more for control of valuable mining areas from which are extracted tantalum ore, the coltan so-called, and also the ores from which we get tin and tungsten, as well as gold. So a conflict which started for a range of reasons to do with ethnicity, land, high-level politics, has become increasingly a grubby struggle for control over natural resources. So just a little bit more about the parties involved. The FDLR, who I mentioned, they are an extremely violent militia group led by individuals who are widely believed to have been involved in the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. Their capacity to operate in eastern Congo is very tightly linked to their ability to get revenues from the mineral sector, including from the trade in tantalum ore. And operate, in terms of the FDLR, means mass murder, mass rapes, burning down villages, torture and forced recruitment of child soldiers. Now, in recent months, they've gone from a position in which they controlled a lot of the tantalum ore trade in eastern Congo to a situation where they've lost control of quite a lot of those mines. And they've lost control of the mines to the government army. On the face of it, that might sound like a good thing, but actually it's not really, because the government army has an equally unsavory human rights record. And the units which are now controlling much of the tantalum ore trade in that region are in fact themselves recently defected rebels who made a hasty integration into the government army last year. And these rebels retain their own political agenda, their own command structure, and they actually have quite a well-established history, the commanders concerned, of reverting to rebellion when they don't get what they want. So the fact that they're currently in charge of these mines is not really very good news. Amongst other things, it's going to enable them to rearm when they choose to. But of course, this has very immediate human impacts as well. The conditions in the mines are absolutely atrocious. People who choose to work there, and choice is a very relative word in this regard, face a situation in which they have to pay off these military units to do the work. They have to pay them, as our colleagues found last month, 1 whole day's production per week in bribes. If they don't comply, they get whipped, beaten up, have their materials confiscated and stolen, or in some cases worse. So you may be wondering what all this has got to do with the global trade in tantalum and investors. Well, Congo produces, by some estimates, which admittedly are not hugely reliable, between 8 and 9% of the world's tantalum. However, not surprisingly, almost exactly none of this tantalum stays in and is used in Congo. Instead, it's exported, it transits through neighboring countries, particularly Rwanda, and gets smelted in a variety of locations, many of them in Asia, and then goes into the manufacture of all kinds of consumer goods and other materials, as you know much better than me. So, without the demand from international companies which are sourcing the tantalum ore, and for that matter, without the financing those companies get from international investors, you wouldn't have this link between the tantalum trade and armed conflicts and atrocities in the east of Congo. Just to be clear, the involvement of international firms in that trade and their investors behind them is not intrinsically a problem. The problem is the fact that the companies concerned, and they include Western companies as well as Asian ones, are not exercising proper controls to ensure that what they source from that region of Africa has not passed through the hands of armed groups involved in that vicious conflict in the east of Congo. In our view, the companies involved and their financial backers pushing them should be undertaking rigorous due diligence on their supply chains to exclude those types of conflict minerals, so-called. They're not doing this, however, and one of the reasons why is they're not yet getting a signal from the people who invest in their companies, who finance them, that they expect them to change their ways. Investors are not calling them